right, everybody. Before we begin, I want you to see a piece of evidence that's been depicted. It's not classified anymore, but it's as close as most people will ever get to the case file. This is the trailer for the movie Breach, Hollywood's attempt to depict one of the most treacherous betrayals in American intelligence history. Check it out.
You're gonna be an agent.
Say it again, okay?
You're gonna be an agent.
You're being tasked to headquarters, where you'll be riding the desk of an agent named Robert Hansen, considered our most knowledgeable analyst on Russian intel. He's also a sexual deviant. This could mean a huge embarrassment to the Bureau. You're gonna keep an eye on him for us.
Tell me 5 things about yourself, 4 of them true.
I don't think I'd be much good at bluffing.
That would have counted as your lie right there.
Is there anything you can tell me about him?
Sure. Take nothing personally.
You know why the Soviet Empire collapsed?
Good morning.
Godlessness. God expects you to live your faith, Eric, at all times.
I don't know what I'm supposed to be looking for. The guy doesn't drink, goes to church every day.
Faith, family, country. Those are the things that matter.
Come to admire him, I see.
Yes.
Respect him?
I never cared about making headlines. Wanted to make history.
He's a traitor, Eric. Started spying for the Russians in 1985. Good news is you're in the middle of the biggest case we've ever run. The damage he's done to the U.S. government is in the billions. It might be years before we truly know how many deaths he's been responsible for.
Why don't we just arrest him?
Can't do that. Director wants him caught in the act.
What if he's smarter than I am?
He spent the last 20 years outthinking Russian spies. He's smarter than all of us.
Have you been in my briefcase?
No.
Don't like being scrutinized. Have to do something about that.
He's parked outside your apartment.
Where were you?
I'm telling so many lies now, I can't keep them straight anymore.
Are you finding this job stressful?
Sometimes.
Pray more.
He knows the names of every source we've ever turned. Their lives are all at risk.
I need to know if I can trust you.
What are you doing?
Who is calling you in the car?
Put the gun down!
I need to know if I can trust you!
All right, there's a lot to unpack there. But what you just watched is the dramatization. What you're about to hear is the truth. The real undercover operative in that story, the man the FBI sent into the lion's den to dismantle a traitor from arm's length, is sitting with us today. Eric O'Neill isn't a legend or a character. He's the eyewitness, the insider, the ghost in the system who caught Robert Hansen by outsmarting and outmaneuvering a master spy on his own turf. And he did it at the ripe young age of 26. In this interview, he takes us to parts that Hollywood didn't know, couldn't show, and wasn't cleared to tell at the time. The psychological traps, the danger, the split-second choices, and how those same espionage tactics have now evolved into something far more dangerous for all of us. Because today, the spy doesn't need a dead drop. He simply needs AI. And the attackers aren't at a park at midnight. They're inside our inbox, our phone, our systems, and leveraging our identities. Running operations at machine speed. Eric and I dig into how AI-driven cyber attacks have rewritten the playbook, how deception is now automated, how deepfakes are replacing human trust, and why the next Robert Hansen won't have to walk into a building. He or she'll simply log into a network. If you thought the movie was intense, wait until you're about to hear what's happening right now. Let's go inside. This is Cybercrime Junkies, and now the show. All right, well, today we're sitting down with somebody who just didn't study espionage. He lived it. He's the real-life undercover operative who helped bring down one of the most dangerous and damaging spies in American history, Robert Hansen. former FBI ghost, cybersecurity strategist, and best-selling author of 2 books, the latest of which is Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime, which I have right here. There's a link in the show notes. We encourage everybody to check this out, and we're going to dive into it today. Please welcome the man who hunted a traitor from inside the shadows, Eric O'Neill.
Hey,
Eric?
David, it's good to be here on Cybercrime Junkies, and I gotta say that book looks pretty good in your hands.
I like it. It usually has a seat up on my bookshelf. But because we're talking about it today, I really like it. I love the cover and I love the content. It reads really well. I really enjoyed your writing style. It wasn't too far over the heads of readers, so people that even aren't technical will really, just like regular business leaders, they will really get a lot out of this book. And that's
good to hear. I wrote it to be applicable to everyone, but also readable. And I write like I speak on stage. I'm a storyteller, and I want to entertain first, and then I want to inform and inspire. So if you're entertained, you're going to keep reading, and you're going to keep learning, and it's not going to feel like learning. It's never going to feel like work. It's going to always be fun.
That is exactly why we have a podcast, right? It is really to socialize it and to really just translate what's going on in the technical space so that people can understand it and it's not painful to learn about it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like to call that demystifying cybersecurity, which can sometimes be very archaic. And when things are hard to grasp quickly, people tend to tune out because no one wants to feel like they don't understand. The problem is if you tune out on cybersecurity, then you're opening yourself up to cyber attacks, and that can be devastating.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And unlike 15, 20 years ago when we had computers around our environment, if they went down or if there was an issue, we were still fine. We had those kinetic physical processes still in place. We are so dependent on our technology now. Would you agree? More so than ever before.
Go out and ask any of your kids to drive you anywhere without Google Maps.
Yes, they can't.
And you'll test your theory right there.
That's really good. I'm going to bring that up to my children right after this because I bring up that fact all the time. That's great. I love that. So let's start at the top. I mean, not at the top of your career, obviously, but you helped bring down Robert Hansen from inside the FBI. I read your story, watched several interviews, read your first book a while ago. When you look at today's cybercriminals, what feels exactly the same as that hunt that you did?
One thing that I talk about in both of my books is how not only cybercrime, but espionage has completely changed. Now, you still occasionally see trusted insiders, people who are either bribed or people who are, feeling that they need to do something for ideology or so on, who are going into physical spaces and stealing information and getting it out and finding ways to give it to intelligence services. But that's sort of old tech. That's the old traditional way that espionage used to occur and has now evolved. And what I say is it's evolved from the Cloak and Dagger shadows and dead drops and signal sites into a modern cyber espionage, which uses the exact same old school tactics in a modern environment. So you're going to see, instead of a person who is betraying you from the inside, that same person might be betraying you and have no idea they're doing it because their account, their username and password, their identity within your data has been stolen by an external either spy or cyber criminal. And they're using that person as a puppet to access things, to change things, to cause mayhem within your systems. And so today, sort of just like going undercover in the FBI to catch a physical spy, Robert Hansen, who ended up being the most damaging spy in U.S. history, what we all have to do in cybersecurity is go undercover in our own systems to go catch potential virtual trusted insiders, spies that are in there and trying to hide from us.
Excellent analogy. Yeah, I mean, what was shocking to me was Hansen's approach of using dead drops. I mean, he was caught after attempting to do a dead drop right at the last time. It was such an archaic way of still transmitting data. 2001, right? I mean, it was
in
remarkable.
a way. So I describe Hansen as he's surfing the wave, right? He's right at the crest of this new wave of cyber spies. And in fact, I called him our first cyber spy because he did steal information from computer systems.
Correct.
The difference between Hansen and the spies who came after him is he'd print it all out and then he'd save it to floppy disks and drop floppy disks in that drop site. You have to understand something about the way that traditional espionage occurs. Very often, you can't change a protocol until your next drop, and they are prearranged. You have certain dates and certain times, which is how I caught him. He was saving those dates and times on his Palm Pilot, and because he had to keep it somewhere. He had encrypted it. He had an algorithm so that you couldn't see the dates in the clear. You had to know some math in order to figure out what the actual date is. He was very clever, but he had to know exactly when he was going to make his next drop to the Russians and get ready and either drop them secrets or drop them a communication that says, I don't have secrets. Our next drop will be, on this date. Right. And so he was stuck in that kinetic posture until he could find out a way to transfer that into more of a cyber way of getting his documents and information and stolen confidential secrets over to the Russians. But the Russians weren't ready for it either. I mean, they were still dealing in dead drops and signal sites. So that year 2001 was such a catalyst for change in how we adopted computer systems. We were still using maps in our cars, right? We hadn't really adopted. There was no Google Maps yet. The internet was becoming everything for everyone. You were still using DSL, kind of like the step beyond dial-up to get into your ISP.
Exactly right.
You didn't have a cell phone that had access to every single moment of human history right in your hand. So that was this amazing time that was translating that layer between analog to digital. And of course, suddenly it exploded. And then we went through the COVID-19 pandemic, which basically picked us up and threw us headfirst into the digital world, into the deep end of it before security was ready.
It really did accelerate. The pandemic clearly did. And yeah, I'd like to think that the development of the smartphone, obviously the iPhone in 2007, but even its precursor of the BlackBerry, that really started to speed things up in our digital adoption, it seems, anyway, as I was living through it anyway.
Well, certainly, as soon as you had a device in your hands
that you can walk around,
you could instantly communicate, and you could suddenly work from everywhere. Back then, it was going through your emails right on your BlackBerry or your Palm Pilot from wherever you were. That changed not only how we work with content, how we deal with information, but also how we work. Because look, here's an example. When I began as an attorney, a first-year attorney at a law firm, a lot of it was still kind of paper. You would have to go use the stacks and in the books. I'm dating myself a little. And by the time I graduated, it was all Lexis and Westlaw, right? Using database systems and typing everything up and emailing your memos. So that technology changes, and then it changes how you work. And now that we can work from home, that's the biggest change in how we work, I think, in human history, because it means that we work all the time. There's no real demarcation between when work begins and ends unless you set it. And sometimes you have to beg, borrow, steal, and battle in order to set that line with the people you work for. So technology always is good and bad. No matter how much it changes us, it always changes us for the better and for the worse.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Most business leaders have a fatal flaw which results in their growth being interrupted or stopped terminally. They ignore the mountain they're about to crash into, distracted by the focus on revenue growth. Until it's too late. Don't become another fatal business statistic. Keep your cybersecurity modern so you can grow without interruption. Stay competitive. Get NetGain. Stay focused on your growth and funding, while NetGain keeps your technology always available with expert-level cybersecurity services to stop breaches in their tracks, all at a fraction of the cost of managing it yourself. Don't wait for a technology disaster to interrupt and cripple your growth. Speak with a specialist today. Contact NetGain Technologies today at 844-777-6278 or reach out online at netgainit.com. That's 844-777-6278 and netgainit.com. Grow your business uninterrupted. Contact NetGain today.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you something. First of all, for the listeners, I have a separate episode just going into some of the details about Robert Hansen as a precursor to this one.
I saw that. I saw that and I said, wait, did my episode ever already air?
No, my friend, no. I
thought it was really clever.
Thanks. I just wanted, for myself, I do all of this for professional development, so I learn. I'm also fascinated by it. And I just wanted to do my own deep dive as well before meeting you and speaking with you. You had a great episode with Megan Kelly and several others. It's remarkable. I'm excited about the success you're having for the book. But before we get into this, I wanted to ask you, so you were very young. I mean, you were a kid. I mean, I started a long time ago, and I was a prosecutor and I was an attorney, but I was like 25 years old, and you were just 26 or so, as I recall, when you did this. I mean, that was gutsy. That was really... What did it feel like? My question I just have to ask you, what did it feel like when you grabbed the Palm Pilot? Like, what was going through your mind?
It was like grabbing a live wire.
Yeah. Wasn't it?
There was a combination of hoping that I was correct, amazement that this caper that we had thrown together really quickly was working, and this dread that I wouldn't get away with it. And knowing that my life was certainly in danger. And I think that it was less about the concern that, Hansen might come back and catch me and shoot me. It was actually more the concern that I would screw this up and survive and then have to face my squad. And just the intense embarrassment and shame I would feel. So I really
a lot
wanted
on
to,
the shoulders
to
of a
do well.
26-year-old. That's a lot.
And at the end of it, David, I wanted to win. At that point, we were sure that he was the spy. I, like so many other FBI agents and employees and ghosts and everybody else who had spent a career working against the Russians, was just shocked and appalled by the fact that he had undermined us from within for all those years. And I really wanted to take him down.
Yeah. Well, and you did. And thank you for that. I mean, the country thanks you for that. And I mean that. That was a lot. That was a big accomplishment at such a young age.
Certainly. And
you've got to be like turning 27 going, well, how do I top last year?
I think people said to me, how does it feel having just been in the center of the biggest case that you'll ever be in, no matter how long you stay in the FBI? And I said, what do you mean? You say you could be in a 25-year career here and you'll never have a case like that. That case doesn't
at that
come
point,
again.
you're like, at that point, I might as well go into consulting because you're kind of done.
I think that's a good rule of thumb to always get out when you're on top.
Yes, and you did. I mean, that was brilliant. So what drove you to write this book? So I love the book. It's really, really good. And I mean that anybody that is interested in cybersecurity and true crime stories, you're really going to enjoy this book. You've got a lot of good stories in here, and you do a good job of translating the espionage, the traditional Cloak and Dagger, into the digital realm. Like you really, it was very well played out. What drove you to write the book? You had prior success. I mean, is there something that triggered you, that drove you, that inspired you to do it?
Well, I had written Gray Day, and part of the reason I wrote Gray Day is because there's the movie Breach, which is a movie that's made about me, and I wanted to write my own story because obviously the movie Breach is based on a true story and it takes liberties, and I wanted to write Gray Day, which is my story. But the reason I waited so long to write it is because I wanted it to be more. And so what it does is it looks at the evolution of espionage from the Cloak and Dagger to today's cyber attacks. And so in a way, Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime is a spiritual successor because it focuses on crime. Now, there's still plenty of espionage in there, but it focuses on crime. And I wanted to write a book that was very deep looking into cybersecurity, but in a way that people would pick it up and finish it. There are pretty much every other cybersecurity book out there. No one really finishes them because they're dry. They give you all the information you need, and sometimes they give you case examples, right? Like you were a lawyer reading a brief, but they don't do it in stories. And I am a public speaker first. I do keynote speeches all over the world and stand up on stages and in every kind of language, simultaneously translated. I don't speak them. And I talk about what we need to know to protect ourselves. And it's a passion of mine. So when you're standing on stage, you get 45 minutes and then 15 in Q&A. That's never enough to say everything you need to say, but you can in a book. And so what I wanted to do with this book is tell the story of why there are so many cyber attacks, demystify what the dark web is, and answer all the questions that people need to make themselves safe, secure, and happy in a time when cybercrime is the fastest growing business on earth. But the other thing, David, I wanted to do, and I sense from what you're saying that maybe this worked with you, is I want you to feel like you're a spy hunter. I want you to feel like you just went through Quantico at the FBI Academy and you graduated in counterintelligence and you're ready to go take on spies. And that's the feeling I want every one of my readers to get. And so it reads like a true crime thriller, where I've pulled back the curtain on a lot of the very traditionally confidential and secret espionage techniques that the FBI uses and other intelligence agency uses. And in fact, the FBI declassified a lot of information for me in telling this book.
That's great to hear. Well, I mean, it's essentially a handbook on how to defeat cybercrime in various scenarios. One thing I wanted to ask you for the listeners or viewers, what are some of the top 3 things that you always tend to recommend that organizations or business leaders, especially some of the smaller mid-sized organizations that don't have, the luxury of very generous budgets to have all the systems in place? What do you really drive home for them?
Well, I started a company called NexusShore a few years ago, and we do cybersecurity advisory, and we focus on the small and medium businesses, the SMB world, because we found that is an area where they don't get the same level of attention and advisory help from, as the big companies do. So we wanted to focus there. And I'll tell you the top 3 things that we see every time we go into a vulnerability assessment of a small company. The first is that 2-factor authentication is not turned on. And that doesn't shock me anymore. I assume we're going to find that. And the reason it's not turned on is because it adds an extra layer of complexity. IT doesn't want to do that to their employees. The employees complain that it slows down their workflow, and workflow is everything, especially if you're small and trying to grow. The problem is today, in a time where AI can crack a password in moments, we need to have something other than password. And I've long advocated that we do away with passwords entirely. We completely get rid of them. They are a total Achilles heel. They actually help cyber attackers breach us. Passwords are useless. I say it in the book. I think I say it in the type of the chapter. RIP the password is dead, right? Right. And so turning on 2-factor authentication everywhere for a business and a person is the number one thing you can do right away in the same day in order to make a substantial change that will help protect you from so many different cyber attacks. The second is shadow IT. So what I mean by shadow IT is in small businesses and small and medium businesses that don't have an overwhelming IT policy that says this is what you can use and these are the things you can't. And that policy is driven by technology that doesn't allow people to install and use other things. Your employees will use it. They're going to find the shortest path to get their workflow done and turned in so they can go have fun, right? And if they feel like the tools you're providing from your business aren't up to the task, they're going to find other tools. And the biggest shadow IT we find is the use of unsanctioned AI. If any organization, I don't care how small you are to how big you are, is not providing a safe and policed way for your employees to use AI, because everyone wants to use AI to help do their work, even if they're just editing, sometimes writing, help me do this email, right? If you're not providing that, they're going to use it outside. And that opens you up to that information.
Without any training and prompt training or compliance, right?
But also that information that someone is taking, that confidential information from your organization and plugging it into the free version of ChatGPT now belongs to OpenAI.
Right.
And is subject to this new attack called vibe hacking, where, I can go in And I won't know that it's yours, but I can see the IP because the AI will hand it over. When I start asking questions about specific industries, suddenly you see all sorts of information that you shouldn't be privy to. So that's shadow IT. And the third is not having someone who is a cybersecurity professional.
Governance. Governance.
So, David. So what happens is most organizations who don't have $300,000 to hire a chief information security officer will take their IT person who has an excellent background in networking and
Bob, like Bob is great when he set up the network. He's in charge of
director of cybersecurity. Right. You go to this conference, and that's not fair, and it doesn't work. And so, one thing we do in advisory is, especially when a company is moving to that growth period where they're going to move from really small to a little bigger to medium, we'll rent them a CISO. It's called a virtual CISO, and they can use one of our virtual CISOs to help them get there and help them make the changes in technology that they need to make in order to reach the next level without being slammed by ransomware, burned to the ground, and filing for bankruptcy.
Absolutely. So, you talk about the revenue that cybercrime generates and how it's the fastest growing economy and industry on the planet. Where does it rank? I've read reports all over the place. Whenever we present on it, we believe it's third, like the US, China, and then cybercrime. Is that what you're finding? Like where does it, if it were a country, where does its GDP rank in the world?
Yes, so based on my research, that's what I've written in the book, in Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime. I call it the third largest economy on Earth. Yep. If we consider the dark web a place with a gross domestic product, GDP, and that gross domestic product is the benefits of the fruits of cybercrime, right? Lining the pockets of countless legions of cybercriminals, and especially the very large cybercrime syndicates that operate out of the dark web using that anonymity, then yes, it is the third largest economy on Earth. Depending on who you look at, it's somewhere between $11.5 and $14 trillion today. And remember that cybercrime is always significantly underreported.
Right. I was going to say, it's not like they're declaring that.
Yes.
Right?
Can get away with not reporting. They won't report. And there is a lot of crime in countries that don't have the same reporting requirements. And remember, while public companies always have to report, some private companies don't. And it just depends on if there was data loss. And it's very complicated and legal. We're not going to get into it. But the fact of the matter is it's underreported, it's a lot, and it's growing. And while organizations have been able to arrest, to some extent, the rise in ransomware, part of that is because there's been a consolidation in the ransomware industry by cybercrime syndicates who have consolidated into what we call big game hunters, who go after cities and massive organizations and supply chains and hospital networks, not just one business, in order to create massive pressure and urgency to pay. So here we have this growing economy. Business is very good. And one thing, David, you and all of your listeners and everybody out there needs to think about is we're filming this in November before Thanksgiving here in the United States. And the scam season for cybercriminals kicked off in October at Halloween. Yes. And it's going strong. So in this lead up to buying presents, especially around Black Friday and the holiday season, there is more cybercrime targeting individuals than any other time of year.
Yeah, and it's so prevalent, right? You talk about in the book how they create the fake sites that look identical to the regular sites. You really have to be cautious. You really have to pause and verify everything that's online.
And not only that, you used to be able to do quick analysis of sites or emails or texts and see the artifacts and problems that would suggest that, okay, this wasn't written by someone whose English is their first language. This is obviously someone who put it together. It's an ugly logo. The spelling's wrong. Now, because attackers are using AI, yes, everything looks perfect. And in fact, AI will go out. If, let's say, I want to scam you, and so I send you an email from Target saying, Target big box store, it's all over the country, is saying, we tried to deliver your package, but we weren't able to. And, click here. This link will take you to our website where you can, put your information in so we can track your package, right? And what they do is they go to Target and they use AI to just copy the website and create a new one, change the URL a little bit so it looks almost like Target's. And so when you click, you think you're there. It looks so perfect.
Exactly
you're there.
right.
Now you've just given up your information to someone who's going to use it and exploit it for identity fraud. And it gets worse when we get into AI deepfakes. You know, when I'm on these podcasts now, I try to go like this a couple times because, you know, the AI deepfakes don't do it. So everybody knows I am the real Eric O'Neill. I'm not just using.
We do a lot with AI deepfakes. I'm going to get into that in just a second.
Sure.
We've covered the ransomware gang Lockbit a lot on this show. We've spoken with people that have gone undercover and engaged with them. A couple of them applied to be digital mercenaries with them undercover so that they can see the inner workings. In your book, you talk about a ransomware negotiation with Lockbit. Can you walk us? Yeah, Lockbit 3.0. Yeah. And could you walk us through that? I mean, it was interesting because you were kind of seeing something. I liked how you got the spreadsheet and you're like, I want to know exactly how long it would take for them to have. They claimed they downloaded 3 terabytes of data, but they said they did it in like an hour or two. There's no way they could have done that from our systems. Right. Can you walk us through that?
Certainly. So the attack
really interesting story.
The attack on a company I was working with, which I just call the NGO because I don't want to embarrass anybody, was by the Russian cybercrime syndicate Lockbit. And Lockbit, and so I used that as a through story. You know, originally when I was writing the book, it was very much about how the pandemic had changed us and how technology had thrown us into this new world of cybercrime. And my agent, who's great, saw my first draft and said, nobody wants to read a book about a pandemic. Try again. So I went back to the drawing board. But while that was happening, this company was under storm by this devastating ransomware group, like I said, out of Russia. And I was taking detailed notes. And as I was thinking about it, I thought, this is my through story for the book. Taking this story and adapting it into the book is my through story that will carry my reader through every chapter. So as you're reading and you're learning about all these concepts in espionage and cybersecurity and cybercrime, you're also reading a thrilling true crime story and how I solved it. Now, I don't want to give too much away, David, but yes, one of the things that's really critical, that's actually the most critical when you're under attack, and this is part of resilience, is the ability to understand the who, what, and where of the attack, right? And the who is kind of the only important to understand, you know, how sophisticated they are and how much you have to worry. But you have to know where they landed, right? You have to know how they got in, and you have to know what they stole. And what they stole becomes very important because that suggests how much disclosure you have to make to everybody whose data was just compromised, which can have massive reputational damage and be very expensive. But you can't know what was stolen unless you know where they landed or how they landed and where they went. So you need to know their dwell time. How long were they in your environment? And part of the story was I realized this guy's saying that they stole 3 terabytes of information, which is basically all the information on their headquarters server, which would have been devastating for the organization because they are a humanitarian group that helps people all over the world. And they had all their lists of people that they help, which could be very dangerous in the wrong hands, especially in countries where if you're being helped by a American non-governmental organization, you could be subject to terrorism. So the company was devastated by that and worried, and considering paying Lockbit. And I was thinking, there's no way. I mean, I've used these systems; they're so damn slow. There's no way this person was able to steal this much. And we were able to do some math and some good work with spreadsheets and some good understanding of dwell time. And it's sort of the spigot that the company used to get information in and out, especially in their cloud servers, to realize that there's no way they stole that. In fact, they hadn't stolen anywhere close to that. It wasn't terabytes, it was megabytes. They were bluffing. They were lying to us. And once we found out they were bluffing, and because I was talking to the attacker on the dark web message board, I was able, and this is the term I use in the book, it's one of my favorite, I was able to tell them to go pound sand. And that's a wonderful thing to be able to tell a bad guy.
I love that. Yeah, and I encourage everybody, focus in on that story because it, like you explained, it is a through story throughout the book. It's great. In your experience, what are the top 3 ways that they are getting into, that cyber criminals are getting into organizations?
Well, the number one way is fooling people. So they're doing it in a number of ways, but the number one way, and the majority of attacks are fooling people. Now, you want 3, so let's start with failure to manage your systems. So, for example, now what cyber criminals are doing is they're using their own AI, because the dark web has their own AI, and they're using their own AI agents to constantly probe and test networks and systems and their target business, right? Or agency or organization. And so that AI agent will sit there and just be a cyber attacker and find that unpatched resource, that vendor who has weak cybersecurity, and start testing to find a way in. And then when they find that flaw, you hand it over to a human, and the human launches the attack. But the majority of attacks, because organizations tend to have at least a minimum level of cybersecurity to keep that out, happen by traditional espionage. And this is where we get into impersonation, deception, confidence schemes, right? What they're doing is they are crafting very clever deceptions, pretending there's someone you trust, pretending there's getting to know you and then gaining your trust, playing the long game in order to get you to trust something that is not true or can cause you harm. And so a great example of that, right? The most basic example that people still fall for is the spear phishing email. Yep. They learn about you on social media, and they target you with an email that, say, comes from your brother or sister and talks about that hike you did with their family and all the kids last week, right? And
because it's right there on social media.
Yeah, and because you talked about it on social media. And here, click here, and here are all the pictures I took. They're awesome. Check them out, right? That's the simplest way to do that. Now, how do you defeat that? Well, you make sure it comes from the right address. You call your brother or sister. Did you really send this to me? We're kind of trained for that, but it gets worse when your brother or sister gives you a call on FaceTime, and just like you and I are talking right now in our little Zoom boxes or Riverside boxes or, podcast boxes, you see that person, and it's a deepfake, and the cyber attacker is somewhere in the world, thousands of miles away, typing what they want your loved one to say. And that can be incredibly deceptive.
Well, yeah, let's explore deepfakes for a second. To me, it is the ultimate checkmate when it comes to social engineering, because you can send a spear phishing email or even a phishing email, but then when you follow it up with a calendar invite for a Zoom meeting, right? And they can ask all of the questions that they would have, and you're there, and even though it's not you, it's the virtual you, and you're answering all those questions, you're alleviating all that concern, right? They feel like they're verifying it, but they're verifying it through the deepfake call, right? When in reality, what everybody needs to do is to pause and go through a trusted channel that they already know the person's at, right?
Exactly.
Text them, walk down the hall, actually call them on their cell that is their number.
And,
right?
and the way to deal with that is to have policies and training that say, I, the CFO, or I, the CEO, are never going to call you or reach out to you on Teams or Zoom, or you send a text or an email and tell you to send a wire here, and tell you to download this application, and tell you to do these things that you shouldn't do. That there are proper channels, and these are the only channels that will do these things. And they want to create urgency. So, if it's a phone call, if it's a deepfake, if it's a text, they're pretending they're impersonating the executive, and they're saying, this has to happen now. And if it doesn't happen now, all these terrible things will happen. We're going to lose this opportunity. This partner is going to go with somebody else. You're going to get fired, right? And they create that urgency, and it will rain down on you like hail from the sky. Like it's never going to end because they don't want to give you a second to think. Because they know that if you take a second to think, your better angels will whisper in your ear, and you'll realize, okay, this can't be right. I need to check somehow, right? So they push and they push and they push until you finally feel so much anxiety and pressure that you cave. And that's what they want. So the biggest trick for any person that is worried about this, whether it's your personal life or business, is if you feel that urgency, stop and think. And if that means you have to hang up on someone you think is your boss, you can call them back and say, I'm sorry, it was a mistake, right? You know, the line dropped. But you need that moment to just take a breath. So anytime you feel that incredible urgency, take a breath, especially now where these scams are going to be. You're going to see countless deepfake scams in the next number of months around the holidays. Absolutely. Where loved ones are calling you. And it's going to happen. The phone calls are a lot easier than video, right? A phone call is so simple. You just type as you want to go. A video, you need to do a little bit more work. So you're going to hear so many phone. I'm hearing from families all the time. The biggest one right now is that I got in an accident call.
Right.
And this one is like wildfire across the nation. And I'm hearing from people every day that read my book and say, yeah, I got a call from my daughter and she got in an accident. And then there was the attorney. And I said, no. I said, no. And if they read my book, they know that with your family, you have a safe word. So my daughter knows if she's in an accident, right? And then when she calls me, you know, unless she's just saying, hey, I'm over here, I got an accident, come get me. If she calls me and she needs money for some reason, she's going to use the safe word. And you see this in so many different ways, David. It's like, I've been in an accident. I'm on it. They find out friends of yours that are on vacation somewhere abroad through social media, and then they call you as that person saying, I just got mugged, I don't have my phone, I don't have my wallet, I can't get in the hotel, I need you to wire money, this is the Western Union, right? And on and on. They are very clever, and they're thinking many different ways that they can fool us and use that sense of urgency and pressure in order to get us to do something we know we shouldn't do.
Yeah, and it's very rushed. It's very urgent. I mean, there's a neuropsychological component to it, right? It raises the cortisol levels. It is that that system that we just have inherently in us, like it's like there's a woolly mammoth in our village and we have to flee, or it's that fight or flight that they raise in us. And the advice to pause and calm everything down allows you to be able to recognize common sense again and to verify, right?
Yeah, and that elation, one thing my uncle Johnny, who's in the book, right, would always tell me, when we would go to Vegas, and I've never been a big gambler, and I would play on the tables a little bit just so I could be there with everyone else. And he would always say, guys, you have to know when to walk away. Like when you're winning, that's when you just want to not stop. And there is that psychological component. Like I can never be stopped. Like I can keep going forever. But when you're up, you need to say, this is when I walk away, right? And it's the same thing. That sense of urgency can also be a benefit. It's not all doom and gloom. Sometimes the cyber attack is something wonderful. Like you've just won this prize. Or, hey, this thing you always wanted, because we're doing analytics on you too, is 70% off today, but it only lasts for 2 hours, right? And that sense of, oh my God, if I don't pay, if I don't jump on this, I'm going to miss out, and I don't want to miss out and regret it later, can really catch you. This is the reason that when we're at auctions, right, whether you're on eBay or I like real auctions, and you're bidding against somebody, you go crazy. You just spent twice what you could have bought it, new on something, because you don't want to lose, because you don't want to miss out, because you don't want someone else to get something that you want.
That's amazing. In your experience, how much, especially when we're dealing with cybercrime gangs overseas, right, how much does ideology or anti-U.S. sentiment play a role? I mean, I think it affects empathy, right? Like they don't really, I know that Lockbit always claimed, well, we don't hit children's hospitals, we don't do this, we don't do that. Meanwhile, they do, right? How much of that plays into it?
There is some, and the organization that was being attacked in the book, that Through Story, was being attacked because they were doing humanitarian work in Ukraine. And it was, published, it was on their website. They were one of the top implementers there. And Lockbit is a Russian cybercrime group who felt that it was their patriotic duty to attack this organization and any other organization. So that is known. That when they have an ideology or they feel that they're opposed to certain organizations or ways of thought, that they will attack. You see this a lot with organizations, for example, that are aiding Israel. Hamas has a very strong cybercrime group, at least they did before we buried them, or they were buried under a bunch of rubble. And they were very adept at launching cyber attacks against any group that was helping Israel in any way, shape, or form, and so on and so forth. Name the conflict, and there's somebody inserting themselves in launching cyber attacks. Like, for example, I think I mentioned in the book, Iran and Saudi Arabia have been firing cyber attacks at each other for decades.
Right.
Some of the great innovation in cyber warfare comes between those two countries. And of course, everything Iran learns launching attacks against Saudi, they use against us. And these countries allow their criminals to attack the West because it benefits them. If we are reeling from critical infrastructure or massive economic cyber attacks, then that benefits China or Russia or Iran or North Korea, who are the big four purveyors of these things.
Yeah. And even the flow of money, right? I mean, if they can bring in millions of dollars into their village or over into their economy, which we're not going to trade with them necessarily and generate that, it's not really considered a crime.
Well,
like
some countries
they're not going to be
are just
prosecuted
criminals.
For.
Right. So North Korea, that whole country is a criminal. The whole government. It just came out, and I'm actually publishing this in my next newsletter, that 5 people were arrested here in the U.S., including a former Army service member, who were working for the North Korean government, allowing them to use their internet addresses as server farms to launch attacks so that job applications from North Korean spies and cybercriminals would look like they came from within the U.S. And what these guys were doing is 136 different companies were compromised by hiring people they thought were U.S. citizens with, these great backstories that were just real identities that were stolen, but were actually puppets of North Korean cyber attackers. And they would get into the business and then they'd actually do the job. They would use AI to just do the job for them.
They wanted the income.
And then they'd get the income, and then they would also steal information, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, they were making a ton of money off of these people's salaries and data theft. And that's just the government acting like a criminal.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about being an email archaeologist. I was fascinated by this concept. Can you walk us through that?
Well, I'm a big fan of Indiana Jones. So what I say is, be an email archaeologist, the kind that wears a fedora and carries a whip, right?
Yes, exactly.
Because, the idea is that the internet is a very dangerous place. It's one of the reasons that in the book, I spend 2 chapters on how your child can be exploited by this early access to the internet we give them. When we give them a phone, and now everyone in the world who wants to exploit them suddenly has a direct link to them. But when you receive an email, and now today when you receive a text, when you receive a direct message on social media, or even a comment on something you've posted, any way someone can connect to you, you have to be careful. And the idea of an archaeologist is someone who is careful. They're in the tomb, there are traps everywhere, they're not just charging in. They're carefully moving, they're dusting here, they're looking here, they're analyzing this. That's the way you have to think every time you receive one of these communications through the email. Otherwise, you'll get caught in the trap, and that can be really damaging.
That's fantastic. Your book just hit essentially national bestseller lists, so that's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
For the leaders, parents, and students who pick it up, what's the mindset shift that you want them to walk away with?
Yeah, certainly. What I wanted to create in the book is this idea of thinking like a spy and then acting like a spy hunter. And that's not just to sound cool. That's literally how we're taught in the FBI counterintelligence. So the science behind it is, if we want to stop the bad guys, and counterintelligence is spies, and I also worked undercover in counterterrorism, which is the same thing, except you're opposing terrorists, we had to know their tradecraft intrinsically. We had to see it and understand it and know it as soon as it came across us, whether we're reading something or we're watching them. And for me, mostly it was investigating and following these individuals. And once you know the tradecraft, you know the countermeasure. So thinking like a spy, right, is putting yourself in the mind of your adversary and understanding all the ways they're going to attack you so you can see it before it hurts you. Acting like a spy hunter, which does sound really cool when I say it, is knowing the tactics that you can use to defeat them, to stop them, and to win. It's counterintelligence 101. You get this cool feeling like you were in the FBI Academy, and you come out knowing how to block that punch before it ever hits you in the face.
That's fantastic. And how do they go about doing that? What are some of the things that we've talked about today, really?
Some of the things we talked about. So one, I use this methodology called PAID in the book. The first part of the book looks at 6 different traditional espionage tactics that have been co-opted wholesale by cybercriminals and are being used against us in sort of this modern internet-focused world. And that's an acronym called DICE, right? Deception, which is the engine that drives everything, impersonation, confidence schemes, infiltration, exploitation, which really focuses on our children and how we have to be protective of them, especially our teens, and destruction, all the ways that the future could be grim if we don't turn things around. And then in the second half of the book, we start acting like spy hunters. And we use a methodology I came up with called PAID, which is prepare ahead of the attack, constantly be assessing. You can't just invest in some cybersecurity and take some training and learn some things, read my book, and then you're done. You have to constantly be assessing. And this is like in the world of counterintelligence, the analysts. We're always looking. We're trying to find the problem. We're trying to see the scam. And then when you see it, or when you even have an inkling that it might be there, when you have that tickle in your stomach, what I call the cop instinct that everyone who reads my book develops, then you go into investigation mode. You do the deep dive, you do the research, you try to figure out if it's a scam. And then finally, you have to decide to act. You can't sit on your hands. You can't bury your head in the sand while everything's burning around you. You have to decide to act and act rapidly to protect yourself before the great damage occurs.
It's great advice. It really is. And it's a model that people can actually practice.
And remember, and I think that's what's important. If you want to give someone a model, it has to be memorable. And everybody can remember paid. You want to get paid. We prepare ahead. We constantly are assessing. We investigate when we need to, and we decide to act. And deciding to act, and thinking of that last one, it's not just to make the acronym paid. Deciding to act is so critical, not only in cybersecurity, but in physical security. I've been a martial arts instructor my whole life, martial arts and then martial arts instructor. And in personal security, most people get hurt or exploited physically, right? Because they don't decide to act. They don't decide to scream, throw the first punch, run, they freeze, right? And so part of the training, whether it's physical or cyber, is to get you in that active mindset. I'm going to stop the attacker, and I'm going to, like I said earlier, Dave, I'm going to tell them to pound sand.
Right. That's fantastic. Eric, I thank you so much for your time today. Absolutely phenomenal. Recommend everybody to pick up your copy of Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime. We will have a link in the show notes for everyone, and we encourage you guys to pick it up and to follow Eric O'Neill on all of your platforms. We'll have links to those. What is on the horizon as we wrap up? Kind of share with us what's coming up.
Certainly. Well, right now I've been on a speaking tour, so I've been all over the world talking about this book and doing wonderful podcasts like this, which are great because they live forever, right? Someone can go back and watch this episode whenever they want. I've been concentrating in the last year and building this great following on a newsletter that I put out. And the reason that I publish this newsletter, it's only once a week on Tuesday mornings. It's long form, so I tell a story, and then I always do the cybersecurity tip of the week, the cybersecurity breach of the week, and then I have some fun with, the AI trend of the week, right? Because AI is crazy and changing every moment.
Yep.
The reason I started the newsletter is because when you buy my book, Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime, and I hope you do, and it's a great gift for the holidays, you'll see that it doesn't update every day, right? It's a book, but it does with the newsletter. And that's my way for my readership and my audience to stay top of mind in what you need to know today about all these things I've talked about.
Well, we will make sure to have a link to the newsletter in the show notes as well.
Perfect.
Absolutely. Eric O'Neill, thank you so much. Thank you for the service to the United States, and thank you for the career you have. And thank you so much for sitting down with us and having a fascinating conversation. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, David, it's been great. And to all your listeners out there, stay safe.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.